U.S. President Donald Trump praised her new book because he says she, quote, rips the New York Times unmistakably anti-Trump bias. But having ascended from Washington bureau chief ultimately to first ever female executive editor of the New York Times, Jill Abramson shot back, saying she reveres the paper and that her new book praises its tough coverage of him. The book is called Merchants of Truth, The Business of News and the Fight for Facts. However, since its publication, Jill Abramson has had to deal with accusations of plagiarism, even as reviews had praised the book, calling it a frank, solid, essential read. Much to discuss with Jill Abramson, who joins us now on the line from New York City, and we're delighted to welcome you to our program tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Steve.
Glad to hear it. Before we talk about the book that you wrote, I actually want to ask you about the book that you didn't write, because as the first ever female executive editor of the Times, you surely have a story that merits a book on its own, but you chose not to write that story. You've chosen to write a story about two legacy media, the Post of Washington and the Times of New York, and two of the newer kids on the block, Vice and BuzzFeed. How come?
Well, I'm an investigative reporter at heart, Steve, and I wanted to do a narrative history of the past decade. Yes, I'd been at the New York Times for most of those years and had been an eyewitness. I could have written a first-person memoir, but I wanted to tell the broader story and history of the tumultuous age of anxiety of the news media as it hurtled towards becoming digital first.
And of course, we will tell that story, but you'll forgive my interest in your personal story a little bit, which you do refer to in the book. And I guess I want to ask, did you always aspire to be the top editor at the New York Times?
No, I didn't. I didn't even know that I wanted to be a journalist for sure till my college years. And I was hooked by, Woodward and Bernstein's amazing reporting on Watergate.
You got there and then it ended rather quickly, right? 2.5 years in, the publisher said, that's it. How come you were fired after such a short period of time?
Well, I go into that in great detail, and I think with a lot of candor in the book. It's the only first-person section of the book. And, I think that my difficulties in the job of executive editor, stem from some of the industry changes that I write about, concerning the Times, the Post, BuzzFeed, and Vice. I'm pretty self-critical about, some of the management errors I may have made. But some of those errors, as I said earlier, are reflective of the broader story.
When the publisher fired you, he actually asked you to sign a statement saying that you were resigning. What did you make of that?
It said I had chose to step down.
What did you make of that?
I wasn't going to sign it and said to him I had devoted my career to telling the truth and I wasn't going to stop doing that at that moment.
Did you think that the expectations placed on you as a woman in a very senior managerial role in arguably the most important newspaper in America were different expectations than those that might have been placed on your male predecessors?
I don't know if I'd call it expectations, but I do think that there is a gender difference, and there have been, many studies showing that women bosses are seen as too ambitious, too aggressive, too pushy, worse words than any of those. But, in men, those same actions or personality qualities are seen as leadership signs in men. So, there is, I think, for sure, a double standard.
But if I recall the story in the book, they did a survey of some of your colleagues in the newsroom, and the word that kept coming back to the people doing the survey was they thought you were a bitch. And that's not something they say about males who run newspapers.
Well, that was the worst word I was referring to.
Yeah, but that's clearly a gender-based word. Did you think they had it out for you at a certain point because you're a woman?
No, I wouldn't go that far. And I certainly don't think I was fired because I'm a woman. But, the liberal use of the word bitch, what was stinging to me.
I'm going to do an excerpt from the book right now, which is going to take us into the next area of our conversation, and that is the president's war with the media. Here we go. For his part, the president doubled down in his war against the fake news media and the journalists he labeled enemies of the people. He singled out the Washington Post and its new owner and met in the White House with A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times, who confronted him with much the same argument as Jeff Bezos, that the constant attacks on journalists were almost certain to result in violence. Now, one of the reasons I suspect so many media are under attack these days is that there are huge chunks of the general public who think that you are violating the former editor Abe Rosenthal's motto, or the former publisher Abe Rosenthal's motto, namely to keep the paper straight. They think you're in the
That's on
tank.
his tombstone.
It's on his tombstone. Well, we know he believed it. They think you're in the tank for one side, and it's clearly not the president's side. Is that a fact?
I think Marty Baron, the editor of the Washington Post, puts it best when he's said many times, we're at work, we're not at war. But, in terms of the Times, it's well known that it's a cosmopolitan newspaper with an urban outlook, that, is more reflective of, people and subscribers on the two coasts than it is of, red America in the middle of the country. And, so it's not surprising that the Times is very tough investigative coverage of Trump, and the many stories they do on him nearly every day are seen as somehow a pylon.
I do appreciate that, but there are, of course, a large chunk of people, again, who believe that the New York Times and the Washington Post have made both a business and editorial decision to attack the president because it's good for their business. Can you comment on that?
Well, I think it being good for business and the Trump stories attracting, the Trump coverage attracting subscribers and lots of eyeballs. I mean, there's a subsidiary, financial motive and reward, but that's not why they're doing the journalism they do.
Do you think Trump's broadsides at legacy media in particular are working to chip away at the media's credibility?
Well, the media's credibility has been quite low for a long time. I'm not sure his attacks are driving them any lower, but, it's very distressing because there are so many good news organizations that are, bending backwards to do the highest quality news, and they tell the truth. Their stories are real news and, based on confirmed facts. And, what the president is trying to do is, undermine that truth. And, calling them enemies of the people is really an attack on the founders who, protected a free press because they viewed, news reporters and editors as watchdogs who would protect the people against abuses of power. And that's why the First Amendment exists and is first for a reason.
I did read in your book that you thought it was absolutely essential to the running of the New York Times successfully to ensure, I guess what we call in the business, a separation of church and state. That editorial does what editorial does, the business side of the newspaper does what they do, and never the twain shall meet. Do you think since you've left the New York Times that clear divide between church and state still exists?
Well, I don't think it's the clear divide that existed for most of my career at the New York Times. And in fairness, I'm not at all suggesting that the Times has, is succumbing to the influence of advertisers or anything like that. But in the digital world, it's really hard to make the clear line between news and business because digital news involves design and technology, and all kinds of things that in the old print world used to fall on the business side. And, in terms of creating new digital products that make money for the Times, there are, lots of joint committees and groups that are a blend of business and news, that existed in one committee when I was the top editor there, but it's now a given that there's a lot more collaboration. New revenue streams became vital after the financial crisis of 2008, and the New York Times, the Washington Post, Vice and BuzzFeed too, they're important institutions in our society, and I don't want any of them to go away. And the Times and the Post were both in danger of going away after the financial crisis. So I realized that, new revenue streams had to be created. And some of them gave me worry, but I haven't seen any scandals at the Times, and maybe the changes in the end, bothered me so much because I had grown up, with the standards and ethics of the print world, and that those have just changed. But I still think that the Times is a completely trustworthy product that is excellent on so many fronts. And, the changes that worried me have not in any way decreased any of those good things.
Well, and it's, of course, much more successful today than it was during those perilous times. You make, or I should say the paper makes hundreds of millions of dollars from its online content now.
I know. I had bad timing, Steve.
I hear you. The question I have for you, though, is, a lot of the popularity, I think, of the Times today is attributable to the fact that you have one of the most, what do we want to say here? What's a nice neutral term? You have a very newsworthy president these days. Once this president is out of office and somebody who is perhaps less newsworthy is in office, do you think the standards of revenues can be maintained?
That is the zillion-dollar question. And, most of your viewers have certainly heard of the Trump bump. And it's not just the New York Times and the Washington Post that have gained so many new subscribers who suddenly are very serious about the news and want to read a lot about Donald Trump. But the cable news shows are, raking in multi-millions, especially, CNN, because, in the nighttime lineup, it's all Trump or all Mueller investigation all the time.
Let me
and
ask
Fox, too, from
Fox,
the opposite point of view.
They're all making $1 billion a year, for sure. Let me ask you about, okay, we've talked about the Times and the Post a lot, the so-called legacy media. Let me ask you about a couple of the relatively new kids on the block, because you also focus on Vice and BuzzFeed. And a moment ago you said that they do have an important place on the journalistic landscape. And I wonder whether you think they are living up to, as they define them, differently obviously from the Post and the Times, are they living up to their responsibilities as news organizations?
I do think that they're both living up to their responsibilities as news organizations, and applaud, in the case of Vice, what they're trying to do is get a younger audience interested in watching news. Especially, they do a nightly news show on HBO called Vice News Tonight, which, has a significant audience, not so much of, younger people who are tuning in for appointment television, but, they're streaming the show, on all their devices. And, it's different. It doesn't have a pontificating, correspondent or, an anchor of any kind. And The style is immersive and adventurous and exciting, and it is catching on with younger people who had stopped watching any kind of TV news. So that's an important thing. And BuzzFeed, has built a great news organization. They have a fabulous editor and an investigative unit of more than 20 journalists. And they were finalists for a Pulitzer Prize last year. So they're living up to their responsibilities too.
Well, I don't have to tell you, you are a little more, you're a little harsher on Vice in the book in describing the cocaine and prostitution habits of the founder.
Of their early days.
Yes, well, in the early days, and the bit of a, I guess a frat house operation where sexual harassment on the job was routine, as you describe it. Are you overly harsh on them in the book? They obviously think you have been.
They think I have been. I try to, give them a lot of credit for the work they do, which is, topic A. But, I think that what they thought is that in some of the passages I wrote, that I am being kind of snarky and being an old media snob and suggesting that, their standards are not as good as legacy news shops like the Post or the Times. And, going back through the book, there are a couple of those passages. One, I've taken out in both the ebook and the next edition because, I could see how it could be interpreted that way. But I found Vice and BuzzFeed the most interesting characters in my book. And, just found the characters in the companies and the founders of them fascinating.
Well, I do want to follow up on the I guess the first thing you said in that answer, which is their writers obviously write with a lot more personality and a lot more opinion and sort of inject a lot more identity politics into their basic journalism than, say, you or I would because of the way we came up in our generation here. Are we older folks just going to have to get used to the fact that these younger folks are just not all that enamored with our old rules, and they're making up their own new rules?
They are, and I think we do have to be accepting of that. But there are, some old rules that are unbendable. And, I think it should always be clear to readers that whether a piece of journalism is opinion or news, and that distinction is important. It really is.
Okay, let's get into the controversy here, since we talk about rules that are inviolable. After the book was released, there's a guy named Michael Moynihan, whom you know, but maybe not our viewers know. He's a correspondent with Vice News Tonight, and he posted a series of tweets, and he pointed out that parts of the book on Vice were, in his view, clotted with mistakes, and that the truth promised in Merchants of Truth was often not true. He goes on to say that while trying to corroborate certain claims, he noticed that the book also contained what he called plagiarized passages, and he listed 6 of them. We're not going to go through all 6 here. We'll focus on just one of them because it happens to be from a publication here in the province of Ontario. The Ryerson Review of Journalism wrote the following. They wrote, in August 2003, McInnes, one of the people you profile, wrote a column in the American Conservative, a magazine run by Pat Buchanan. In the magazine, he called young people a bunch of knee-jerk liberals, a phrase McInnes and his cronies use often, who believe anyone with dark skin over anyone with light skin. He laments the liberal views of most of the people who pick up his magazine and say they're brainwashed by communist propaganda. In your book, you write, he wrote a column in the American Conservative, a magazine run by Pat Buchanan, calling young people a bunch of knee-jerk liberals, a phrase McInnes and his ilk often used, who would believe anyone with dark skin over anyone with light skin. He lamented the liberal views of his magazine's readers, saying they were brainwashed by communist propaganda. Obviously, those 2 paragraphs look a hell of a lot alike. What's the explanation?
The explanation is that, Michael Moynihan, I think, cited 6 or 7 examples of what he said were plagiarism. And I certainly had no intention of stealing or taking anybody's work without credit. I was using a system, I won't get overly technical here, of footnoting to give credit. And, in two cases, which was Ryerson and Chicago Timeout from a long time ago, I somehow missed crediting them in my footnotes. I have 70 pages of footnotes. I have 840 separate citations. I had no intention of not crediting anyone. I made a couple of sloppy errors that I've corrected and said, I'm so sorry for. And there was no intentional wrongdoing here. And in the case of all the other pieces that Michael Moynihan cites, like in my footnotes, I don't have the right page matched up, but every one of those sources is credited elsewhere in those footnotes. So if I intended to not credit them, why would I credit them somewhere? In one case, I credit an author 3 times for the article that became controversial, because I used some quotes from it. But it's credited. So I don't think all this criticism has been on target.
Well, let me follow up with this, because I saw you on CNN the other day with Brian Stelter, who said intention doesn't matter.
Well,
The
that's
fact that it
just
happened,
wrong.
he says the fact that it happened is what matters, and he also says that's what the New York Times also believes. What's your response to that?
Well, I'm not going to get into a semantic debate with Brian again. I had my say on his program, and I think I have answered these questions to a fare thee well, Steve.
Okay, let's leave it and move on to, in our remaining moments, I want to talk about this. You said in your very first answer off the top, this truly has been the age of anxiety for legacy media. We've seen thousands of jobs lost, newspapers folding, local news coverage gutted. Do you think the days of print media are coming to an end?
Well, they'll eventually come to an end, of course. And I teach 2 classes on journalism. And, for the past 5 years, none of my students read a newspaper. They just don't. They read news. They're very well informed, but they read on their smartphones most of all, or on their laptops. And that's just a reality. And, as long as the print paper is making money, in the case of, the New York Times, it makes plenty of money still. But the tragedy, both for news and for our democracy, is the withering of local news coverage and local papers. And, they have been closing by the hundreds or being taken over by vulture capital funds and stripped down for parts. And that's, would really, I was talking about the founders before, that would alarm them, because the local papers are the ones who are closest to the people, and they enjoy, bigger trust numbers than any others because of that closeness. So it's a real threat that local newspapers are going away. Some of them are, in effect being replaced by very good local digital news organizations, but the vacuum is so big that these new initiatives can't really fill what is gone.
So in conclusion, then, we do have to make the distinction between the end of newspapers and the end of journalism.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like you're also saying that in many, many smaller cities and towns across North America, we are talking about the end of journalism, and that can't be a good thing, presumably.
Right. I hope not. I don't think there are that many places where there's literally no journalism. And I'm, in the end, an optimist. I think, news and information and storytelling is a basic human need and want, and that's going to survive. And I agree with Clay Shirky, who said we have to stop mourning, the end of newspapers and just make sure that we collectively save news itself, no matter how it's delivered.
Amen to that. The name of the book is Merchants of Truth, The Business of News and the Fight for Facts. Jill Abramson has been our guest, and we thank you for joining us on the line from NYC. Good to meet you, Jill.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.